Is China getting out of corn? We are going to speak with Jerry Gidel about this and about the coming USDA WASDE report right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, we have seen a report from FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization for the United Nations, and they are reporting that China has reduced their stocks of corn very significantly. I guess the U.S. Has sent a lot of corn recently, but they are starting to distribute those reserves.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's something that we have been discussing here in the U.S. about what the actual supplies and reserves have been in China. Really, I don't know, 10 years or longer, maybe closer, a long, long time from there. Definitely, they did make some adjustments, about 8 or 10 years ago in that, but their crop sizes and that, and the amount that might be in reserve and what happened with that. But I think really what's really potentially changed the real reserve. Let's just use the real reserve versus what the numbers might say they should be, and that it really has started to indicate that because of the high prices in China, and that and the fact that the direction of pork production in China has moved from the mom and pop small producers up to substantial producers that really need good quality feed for their animals, and that it's not something that you can kind of go back and forth, and you might have some spoilage and stuff like that, and the hog will kind of get by. That you've got to keep them on a schedule. You've got to keep the facilities filled up. It's a Western style of livestock production that they have embraced here in the last 3 or 4 years, and even before they had their African swine fever situation. But now, to get the number of pounds they need for their food source, they really have to go that direction. And I think that's what's kind of come to fruition here with the FAO deciding the fact that they had a significant change. It was 54 million metric tons was what they came up with here as an adjustment in the ending stocks levels, and that from their previous estimates in that. And it's a combination, I think, of some stocks that really went out of condition, that just didn't really can't be utilized in the current feeding operations, and that maybe some misnumbers that was actually in the stocks to begin with. That's, as we said to begin this conversation, Chinese stocks have always been a mysterious scenario and a state secrets. They never did say how much they really had, other than, well, yeah, this is production and this is what they say at the end, so we're building up stocks somewhere. And to some extent, the style of storage that they had for this grain, for primarily the corn is the one that had the poorest storage for it. Soybeans really never did have much storage for that. It was utilized as it went along because it was imported. Wheat, that's a lot more human consumption, and bread and noodles and things like that. So it was taken care of a little stronger. But corn had the poorest storage, and I think that's what the realization was that came up today. Now, the price activity today didn't really respond dramatic to that, because it really was going back to what happened in last week's purchases. In that, we had over a 5.8 million metric ton purchase from one country in 1 week. Wow, that's a big, big number. That's 230 million bushels counting, and it turns out that that's really the biggest 1 week total. I think there was a 3.9 million, something like that went to Russia back in the early 90s. and that it even overtook 81 million bushels back in September of 2009. So a significant number. Actually, we also ended up having about, I think my calculation is like 1.6 million metric tons of other purchases. We also had the Mexicans, we had the Japanese, we had unknown, and we had South Korea. There we go. The top four participants also had purchases going on because of the dynamic improvement in prices from the low $4 right back up to this 550 level. And that's quite a significant factor. As we said, that's 230 million. And I think that's will have the USDA impact their February 9th numbers we'll see on Tuesday.
And do you think that's behind the corn rebound recently in the Chicago Mercantile Exchange?
Oh, definitely. It was, on a daily basis, it was every day was always started out with, I think, 1.3, and then we had 600, and then we had a 1.9, and then the capper was the 2 million metric tons. That was above the previous record Chinese purchases. That was from Thursday night, which turned out to be announced on Friday, which turned into being in the Friday to Thursday export week that prompted yesterday's information that came out. And so, as I said, I think traditionally the USDA comes into these February reports with kind of, we did a lot of adjustments last month. We got to know what South America is going to do on their crop sizes and stuff like that. Exports are kind of going along, no big deal. Now all of a sudden, this particular adjustment that came through is going to prompt them to make a change. The big question is, last week when this is going on, people were getting as high as 350 to maybe 400 million increase in the USDA's number. Oh man, the 2.55 the USDA is using is definitely too low. The problem is I don't know if we're going to see the USDA jump in here and make a adjustment like some people are hoping for at 400 million in one fell swoop. That just isn't their style. They tend to be, let's take a incremental step in demand going up, and then if we don't have any cancellations or something else comes along, or that type of thing, then we'll go ahead if it looks like that they are really going to go with it. Because you buy something, that doesn't mean that you actually have to ship it out of here. And that's the other big question right now in my mind is that with this my 2.8 billion number that I'm using here, that really requires a 65 million weekly shipments for every week, which is right now we're on 31 more weeks till we get to the end of the year. And that's a hefty average weekly rate on corn, and that's going to be the interesting situation. How does the shipments go? How does the USDA handle all those things as we go forward into the next week's September 9th report? I think that even despite the fact that we didn't have a lot of announcements this week, a few 100,000 ton overnight sales, we still kind of hung right around this 550 zone and that most of the week. And it's because people want to see where that number is on Tuesday of next week. And a similar situation on soybeans.
Yes. Do you think they will bring any changes to their forecast for the Brazilian corn production? The Brazilian government already recognized that the Brazilian corn output would be lower than expected. So are you seeing that the USDA will change their number?
Well, they've been to 109, and there's a few people that, on a big survey we had, a week or so, 10 days ago, it was down slightly from that 109 number, but not significantly. But the last couple of days here, and I think maybe you've seen that yourself down in Grande do Sul, some of this first crop corn definitely got dinged up. But the key question is, Are we going to see much like a 107 or 106, 105 type number? That's not good, because actually last year's production was, I think, wasn't it 105 or something like that? So we're really going back down to last year's number, which is not a terrible situation, from the standpoint of available supplies. It's just the fact it's not like we always get to assume these days that every year we're going to have more production and it's going to be bigger and better all the time. It doesn't always work that way. Now, the key question, though, and how this is all going to ultimately come back is how does things progress here on the second crop corn in Mato Grosso? So we still haven't got much planted up there. The last numbers I've seen on even harvesting for soybeans have been in the I think it was like 5% nationwide, but basically in Mato Grosso, maybe you're pushing around 10 or 11%, and at this point, we're still at the time when we were 10, 11% on harvesting on beans up there. Traditionally we were up in the 20s, maybe even 25% for this time of the year. So we're still behind. The rains in Mato Grosso have been a lot more erratic, or what you say. It's not been this heavy rain that's hit in Paraná and down through Santa Catarina and down into Rio Grande, which has really stalled their harvest down there dramatically. Interestingly enough, people look at the corn down there first, and they look in Rio Grande and Paraná, and then beans. They tend to have some first crop beans that they want to have, because that's what really supplies Paraná for its beans for the shipments in January and February. But it'll be coming. I guess that's the big quick question, is what that turns out to be. It's been really surprising. Nobody has really felt like the weather in Brazil has had a huge long-term impact on soybeans, and soybeans are a pretty resilient crop. We'll have to see that. Argentina is going to be interesting. We had this whole scenario of very dry conditions. We got one great set of rains here a week and a half ago into and it's this week is dry. They're talking about this coming week being dry, and even the Brazilian Buenos Aires Exchange actually slipped their bean and corn estimates just a little bit this week.
Yes, so you are not expecting any huge change for next week's report?
Well, I guess it depends on your perspective. I'm looking for a 1.32 number on corn. That's down from 1.55. So I'm looking at 250 million increase in exports, but I'm also anticipating that they're going to double their imports here in the U.S. It's not really going to come from Brazil. It most likely to be coming out of Ontario and Quebec, Canada, into the Eastern Corn Belt, New York and the Northeast. And that's a stage. Just go in the right direction. I don't think that this market is going, unless they see some renewed Chinese business, in that are we in an explosive type situation right now in corn, because we're still not getting a great feel as to what South America's corn production is going to be, but at the same time it's going the right way. And if the shipments really start picking up and start to say, hey, yeah, the Chinese have bought it and now they're going to ship it, now I'm going to, and this thing could slip down closer to 1 billion or 1.1, then I think going forward. But, to some extent right now, the world's going to be having their focus on South America and even on the soybeans. The soybeans in this issue, all of a sudden here since the crop report, the shift has been all the way over on the corn side here over the last couple of weeks because of prices rallying because of the drop in the production in the U.S. Then we had these Chinese purchases and stuff like that, and that now the rains in both Argentina and Brazil have really kind of, I guess, what do you say, calm the beast here for a little bit short term. But soybeans and protein are highly important and will continue to be. That's the real interesting thing on soybeans right now. Oh, I shouldn't be bouncing this thing. Sorry. It turns out that the exports sales at this point, with a couple purchases we've had and weekly stuff for fill-in, because of the fact that we haven't seen the Brazilian beans available at the ports yet, has prompted people in the U.S., or Asian buyers, worldwide buyers buying U.S. to fill in the needs, and that we're in a situation where we're right up here at 96% of the USDA's projection. We're only 75 million away. So, wow, why can't the U.S., they should be jumping their exports 50 million. That's not really their style. The World Board people that are involved with that, they really have at this stage of a game in a bull market, they really have to be shown the fact that it's actually going to go past their estimate and many times before they adjust. The other key question in this thing is, don't forget, we're 3 weeks away. Even if it's been delayed, we're going to start to see a huge amount of beans coming available in Brazil here very shortly. And the 1 point, even if it's 130 million versus 133, and we end up having say only 48 million metric tons of beans in Argentina, 10 million metric tons in Paraguay. All of a sudden, we got close to 190 million metric tons of beans coming available for the next 4 to 6 months. Some people in the U.S. and a lot of people, myself, don't really think about how many bushels is that? That's 7 billion bushels. 7 billion bushels. We produce 4.1. Wow, that's a whole mountain of beans coming at us. So do I have to rush out here if I can get by for 10 days, 2 weeks? I think I'm going to keep my chips a little bit closer to my vest here, and we'll see how this turns out. And that's the reason why this thing is really in an interesting situation. You look at the fundamentals of the U.S. and you say, wow, we're just going to go right down to zero in our stocks. Well, sometimes all of a sudden the wall shows up and nobody wants to buy from here. And we sit here with this 75 million yet to hit the USDA projection, and it doesn't increase for 6 or 8 weeks. Saying, well, what's going on? They're watching Brazil or Argentina. What's going on there? And that's this whole thing. This is the worldwide market anymore. And that's really going to be the key feature looking at soybeans going forward. There's people looking for about most people 10 to 12 million, or maybe 13 million down on the USDA's 140 million number. And I don't think that's impossible. I think the one thing that would happen here is that we'll increase our imports. We did it last month by 20. I think we could increase it more if we saw more exports, being pushing us a little bit. But I'd be real surprised if we get to see a number that's going to be 100 million or less in the near future, because of the fact that we have this all new alternative source of supplies in South America, and it's just all of a sudden we got a whole new harvest, and it's a huge one coming at us. So we don't want to get too wild on that. But at the same time, weather is going to be a big deal, and this thing could still flash up to $14.30 to $15 if something kind of goes haywire here in the near term, because this market is highly charged at this point in both corn and soybeans.
Yes, we have seen some reports that China has not fulfilled the phase 1 of the trade deal with the United States. How do you think that is going to play out now with a new administration in the United States?
I think it's going to be the idea of thanks for the good try. I really appreciate you and that kind of stuff. We'll kind of let things kind of go. Yeah, the difference seems to be they got about 29 billion versus the 36.5 billion that was supposedly in there. And if you think about it, the whole COVID-19 coronavirus issues, things of that nature, going on. I think the one thing is interesting on it here is that the U.S. side and the new president and the administration, they're not all of a sudden taking their foot off the pedal here on the Chinese tariffs. They are, and there seems to be lots of talk about the European and the U.S. getting back together on getting their trade situations worked out, maybe reducing some of their tensions on that, maybe reducing tariffs there, and probably the same situation possibly in the North America relationships with Canada and Mexico. And that, in essence, I think that the new style or the different approach in this thing is going to be that the U.S. wants to get more friends around us when we talk to the Chinese and say, oh, by the way, let's see if we can get this worked out on some of our other issues here on semiconductors and on some of the other approaches you do on state-run businesses and stuff like that. And, we can all coexist. I think there's a different approach and a different mentality of how this happens, not the bully pulpit approach from the previous administration.
And given all the context that we are having and that we spoke today, do you think that corn is the leading commodity right now?
Yes, because of the dynamics that's happened here in the Chinese purchases. The one thing that all of us in the trade are trying to really analyze in this thing is that this is not the style of how China has acted in the world trade situations on agricultural products in the past. And even you go back and think about how they've approached the soybean situation and how they were last year when they were getting their soybeans from South America, they were buying new crop beans in South America. And right now, the reports are that we're somewhere in the 55 to 65% of this crop is already purchased in South America. The corn purchases in last summer because of typhoons and things like that before our harvest and the activity in that world. But then to come in after the price of corn had made, $1.50 rally or maybe $2 if you want to say and come back in and buy a bunch of corn on a pullback, that's makes people nervous, and even me. It's like, well, do they do something? Do they have something going on in their weather forecast that around the world? But the one thing you got to remember is their internal prices in their currencies, and that we're talking about $11 plus. Even with the U.S. prices and at the Gulf and getting in the ship and all that kind of stuff, it's still competitive. And so from there, and also I think that the real need to have quality types feeding supplies for their hog operations, I think, has become a reality that they didn't totally understand until they started to look at what's happened over there and the quality of what they have. I think that the actual ownership of these, and interestingly enough, a lot of these hog operations are owned by foreign entities. They're not. The whole concept of putting in big hog operations started 10 or 15 years ago, and it was put in by the Asians, New Zealanders, Australians, that kind of stuff in China. There's also Chinese people doing the same thing, but it's a situation that even the crushing facilities, all that type of thing, a lot of outside investors have been involved in the processing of food and food for the Chinese people. And I think all of a sudden, maybe they're even voicing their opinions to Beijing about, hey, we got to make sure we have a good source here, and I don't trust your reserves that you want to sell me. Actually, the other twist of this thing that's come into it is that we talked about the fact that the quality of the storage for wheat was likely better than corn. Well, interestingly enough, we had 2 wheat sales out of reserves. They just disappeared quickly, really, really quickly. They had 4 million metric tons of pop. And that's suggesting that maybe they're looking at that as a feed source. This time, the last one they just had was only subscribed to about half of that. But I think it does point out that that this whole feed relationship now has become a lot more quality oriented than maybe it was before. That doesn't mean that the Chinese can't produce good quality corn. The biggest problem is it's up by Korea and the feeding's down by Hong Kong, so that's a long ways in between, and that's part of the other issue in China. Their transportation issues are great going east or from west to east and to the Gulf or to the coast, but going from Delhi and back down to Hong Kong or those areas, there's not many transportation roads or to railroads that take things that way. They have to put them on a ship and take it down there, which doesn't make it easy.
Are you still bullish for soybeans and wheat?
I'm optimistic about them. I can't say that right now we're in kind of, I think, a testing pattern on all the grains at this point. The wheat market has got its enthusiasm recently because of the Russians deciding that they don't like the price of their wheat internally, and they've been first they had a 25 euro dollar tariff, then he went to 50. And now they're talking about having some impact on their new crop, that kind of stuff. That's a dangerous road for them from there. So to some extent, the action in the wheat market is going to be a weather issue probably here in the U.S. as we get into the March-April period, how we're coming out of dormancy in that. And soybeans, we're watching South America situations. I'm optimistic about all the U.S. prices. I think the key question right now, though, is that some of this is really going to, the big potential to the upside really depends on, surprisingly of all things, how the U.S. Drought situation in the West impacts the Midwest this spring and summer. There's been past histories where that significant drought has moved into the Midwest. The last one we can all remember, of course, is 2012. There's been 1995, 96 is there. There's some other years that have some 1988, were other years where this thing significantly changed. And that to me is going to be the real key factor going into, are we looking for the $7, $8 beans, the $18, $7 to $8 corn, the $17, $18 beans, the $10 wheat? That's where those prices will have to come from, is an issue in the U.S. here, where our production for the coming year here is going to be under threat. Because right now, there's going to be expanded acres in corn and soybeans because of the current prices. And that's another issue. We got a big report or big conference going in Congress in Washington, D.C. I'll get all this straightened out anyway. On the February 18th and 19th about what the USDA might think about. They have adjusted their numbers on what they think for the coming year. We've had numbers all over the million acres. The corn has been as high as 94. I've heard beans as high as 96. I've heard them as lower than or only up to like 88. There's lots of ideas going on here because we have these prevent planted acres from last year are going to come into the mix. And how do they come and where do they go? And we have less cotton, less rice. Do we plant more spring wheat? Lots of things in the hopper. So we got lots of things to discuss. There's always something new.
Your final word, sir.
Final word. I guess right now, producers and people out there, this is the time in the grain markets where this is the tough area to look at. It's the kind of I'd like to see it go higher. I'd love to have it, but at the same time, we've come a long way. Both corn and soybeans, and that I'd like to get the numbers I threw out here after the production report, the 550 level in corn and the wheat getting up to the 670 to 690 values on Chicago wheat happened here. And so I like my 10% that somebody might have in my pocket. On the beans didn't get to my number. I guess I'm really interested on that because they're that's where this thing still has maybe a pop for, from their current values of 50, 75 cents. Or it could even get crazier if something really goes haywire here. All of a sudden, the beans in South America get delayed. The size of the crop isn't there. Lots of emotions. And interestingly enough, the world markets still gravitate around Chicago but the same problem is the world isn't able to look at it with really great attitudes or great eyes to see what's really going on in South America. Sometimes it takes a few things can be kind of cloudy down real biggie for, but I really feel like people shouldn't be betting big parts of their crop that this thing's going to have a substantial upside from here. But at the same time, I don't know how much we're going to back off because we have all these features out here. We got to get this grain pushed out of the U.S. We've got to figure out what kind of spring and growing season is going to have, what happens in South Argentina and Brazil's growing seasons, growing season in Argentina and harvest in Brazil, how that all impacts things. We got multiple things that we got to watch, and it's going to continue to be an interesting year. Last year we were slugging it through at the lows of the market. Now we got to stare into the tough part of this market. How high is high?
Jerry Gidel, thank you.
You bet. Always good to be with you, Willis.